From the headquarters of Telesur English in Caracas, Venezuela, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. We begin in Brazil, where general elections scheduled for Sunday will be the first following the coup d'etat against President Dilma Rousseff, which resulted in a major setback for social policies for the nation. Workers' Party candidate Fernando Haddad reaffirmed that his government's first actions will be to revoke the constitutional amendments that froze public investment for 20 years.
We're going to reform the tax system because the very rich in Brazil don't pay taxes. Those who pay taxes are the poor. The poor need to pay less to start consuming again, to re-stimulate the economy, and we need to compensate this by having the rich pay a bit. The more you stimulate hate, the more fascism will grow, and a substantial part of the Brazilian elite has abandoned social democracy for fascism.
Meanwhile, former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva sent a public letter to the Brazilian people encouraging them to go to the polls. Lula says voters can choose equality and social justice by voting for Haddad, and that they can opt for inequality and benefits for the wealthy if they elect Jair Bolsonaro. The former president also says the Workers' Party can guarantee democracy. So let's look at the rise of the presidential candidate Fernando Haddad.
After the triumph of Dilma Rousseff in the last presidential election 4 years ago, the Workers' Party was attacked by the opposition. Media and elites led to the impeachment, privatizations, austerity policies, and the imprisonment of former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. The Workers' Party found in Fernando Haddad an option to replace Lula.
Lula was a good president. I vote for him. I will vote for Haddad and for the entire Workers' Party.
I will vote for Haddad because Lula was the only president who worked hard for the northern region.
I will vote for Haddad. He is ahead on the polls and we are going to win.
We are waiting for the general election. Haddad will win. He will receive the presidential sash and everything will go back to normal.
Fernando Haddad is an academic, former mayor of Sao Paulo, and former minister of education. He helped found 18 universities, 173 school campuses, and 360 federal institutes. The Workers' Party also established an education policy to give more opportunities for Black, Pardos, and indigenous people. Among his proposals are the abolition of the labor reform, a reform on social investment and privatization policies imposed by President Michel Temer. Also, a reform of the state system to establish a truth commission to investigate crimes of the dictatorship and the development of a basic food income. If Haddad wins the presidency, he will continue using Petrobras as the main axis of Brazil's economy. This was the same economic strategy used by the previous administrations of the Workers' Party.
Petrobras grew with the price policies that we used to apply. We have taken into account external prices, but in relation to their impact on product costs. However, Michel Temer has transformed Petrobras into a speculative company.
But Haddad needs to convince Lula supporters to vote for him. Lula was leading the polls until his candidacy was revoked by the Electoral Court. However, the new government program developed by Haddad has Lula's support.
It is more advanced than other economic programs presented by the Workers' Party in previous presidential elections. It contains very important structural reforms like the tax reforms and the banking reform. The tax reforms will make those who make more money pay more and those who make less pay less. Brazil has a very regressive tax structure. More than 60% of taxes are paid by the poorer sectors of the country.
The Workers' Party seeks to win their first presidential election since the impeachment of Dilma Rousseff. The polls anticipate an eventual second round between the extreme right and the Workers' Party.
Now we go to Bolivia, where the country will appeal the ruling of the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, regarding its maritime dispute with Chile. President Evo Morales says he will send a letter to the court to highlight what he called contradictions in its decision. The court in The Hague ruled that Chile is not obligated to negotiate sea access with Bolivia. This happened on Monday.
It is not over even if the court has decided it will not accompany our maritime claim. It has accompanied, however, almost every nation in the world in their claims, the multilateral world. We will continue because it is our boisterous demand from the people of Bolivia. Just think about it. I'm not sure the court understands this.
Also, President Morales said he will order an investigation to determine the economic damage caused for Bolivia while lacking sea access.
We have decided to do a complete investigation on the economic damages after the 1879 invasion. First, they blocked imports and exports, all the damages by the 1904 duty, an unfair imposed duty local and international journalists. You can investigate all those strikes on Chile's ports yourself.
And following that ruling, Venezuela's National Constituent Assembly gave President Morales an honorable distinction for his defense of Bolivia.
We are agreed to give this distinction by the National Constituent Assembly to our revolutionary socialist anti-imperialist brothers, Evo Morales, from the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, for his outstanding work defending the people of Bolivia, for his commitment to the anti-imperialist fight in Latin America, and especially for his infinite loyalty to the Bolivarian Revolution, but under the inspiration of Liberator Simón Bolívar and Commander Hugo Chávez.
We now turn to Mexico, where people are paying tribute to the victims of the Tlatelolco massacre. 50 years ago, Mexican troops opened fire on student demonstrators, killing hundreds. A group of artists staged a memorial to commemorate the victims. They traced the country's silhouette and placed a series of objects that remained when people tried to flee the repression. At the time, the government said around 20 people died, but independent reports have found that at least 500 people were killed on that day.
We are here for the installation of the memorial, A Scream of Hope and Rebellion, which is a tribute to the comrades and fallen comrades of the October 2nd massacre, perpetrated by the genocidal regime of Gustavo Díaz Ordaz.
In addition, survivors of the Tlatelolco massacre report that authorities have not provided sufficient assistance. They say that until now, authorities have not brought forth a single trial against the killers.
It was established that what happened here 50 years ago was genocide. However, to date, there is not a single person who committed the genocide in jail. There's not a single person who committed the genocide that has been punished for the killing of the students, of our friends of 1968 in this place.
Our correspondent Pablo Perez has more details from Mexico City.
Where 50 years ago there was this killing by under the orders of the then President Gustavo Díaz Ordaz that ended with the massacre of over 400 students, member of the Comité 68, the social movement that started in the universities of Mexico City and spread all over the country. Well, historian says that movement 50 years ago was fundamental for the history of social movements here in Mexico. And that repression that forced so many students to go into hiding or to move out of Mexico City is even was part of the roots of some organizations such as the Zapatista Army of National Liberation. Well, 50 years ago there was the massacre, and it was until this year that the Special Victim Commission agreed that it was a state crime. It was a crime against the citizenship by their own government and the surviving members of the Comité 68 say that it's okay that they agree that it was a crime, but that they want the criminals to be held responsible for their acts, as there are some surviving members of the government still, and they have not been in trial since the Felipe Calderón government ended the Special Commission for Investigation of the Crimes of the Past.
That was Pablo Perez from Mexico. And coming up, we have more stories. We'll be back. Welcome back. A historic ruling in Chile is forcing a company to return their land to an indigenous community. Forest company Bosques Arauco must restore 97 hectares of the land to the Mapuche community of Ignacio Huilipan. According to the judge, the company surpassed the limits of land that it had granted. A wildfire that had been raging since Saturday in Ecuador's capital, Quito, was finally put out early Tuesday morning. The fire reportedly burned over 600 hectares of grassland. Over 120 firefighters and a helicopter were deployed to fight the blaze. Authorities are still investigating the cause of the fire, but they believe it could have been caused by local farmers or hunters.
There's a speculation that rabbit hunters started the fire, trying to smoke out the animals from their burrows. There is a very reckless behavior because we have to understand that the loss of wildlife is irreplaceable.
The public ministry is once again attempting to remove the immunity of Guatemala's President Jimmy Morales so he can be investigated for alleged illegal campaign financing.
President Jim Morales is alleged to have requested and hid the source of over $1 million in undeclared campaign funding during his 2015 presidential campaign. However, he has denied any wrongdoing.
He received the money knowing where it came from. Investigations show that the money was received by the same person that was registered as candidate and as the general secretary of Morales' party. The president was the secretary of the party at the time. He had to inform the Supreme Electoral Tribunal about this money.
The public ministry has said it has documents, emails, and testimonies of businessmen who admit that they gave Morales the money for his campaign.
With this money, Morales financed propaganda and also the new logo of his party.
The International Commission Against Impunity also asked the authorities to investigate the president. In return, Morales expelled the UN mission from the country. Analysts say this shows Morales is avoiding any action against him.
The president is not the only one involved in this. Many public officials are also linked to this corruption scandal, from the executive power, congressmen, and even some military men. They are also protecting themselves.
People have protested against President Morales, demanding his resignation. They want him to go to trial.
Chile's Catholic Church has retired a controversial manual which provided advice to priests on how to behave around children. The text was aimed at preventing more cases of sexual abuses in the church. It talked about inappropriate behaviors such as kissing in the mouth, slapping the butt, or touching the genitals of children. The Archbishop of Santiago has apologized for this. Social and political movements in Caracas, Venezuela have demonstrated in support of Palestine and rejected international intervention in the country. Let's look at the story.
Plaza Bolívar in Caracas was the stage where Palestinians and Venezuelans gathered to reject the actions against the sovereignty of Venezuela promoted by the White House and its allies.
The Palestinian struggle has always been supported by Latin America, especially by Venezuela. We have shown our support for the people's fight against the world's aggressors.
Venezuela has maintained its support for the Palestinian people. The union of both nations was celebrated by young Palestinians that live in the South American nation.
We thank Venezuelans and President Nicolás Maduro for opening their doors. This is now our second country.
They say Venezuela is their second motherland. Hamse is one of the more than 1,000 young students who received a scholarship from the government to study medicine. He highlighted youth must defend itself from the international right wing.
As medicine students, we can provide healthcare where it still doesn't exist to the poor countries. Education is a right for everyone. We, as Palestinians in Venezuela, are able to defend our rights and our country. We can protest the aggressions against our country.
They also thank the support of many governments at the 33rd United Nations General Assembly. Despite the situation, they continue to express joy and pride for their culture.
After over 100 hours of talks between unions and the government of Costa Rica, there's still no solution to put an end to the strike.
As negotiations with the government have proven to be unsuccessful, thousands of union members have decided to continue their strike, which has now entered its fourth week.
We haven't agreed on anything. We were working on a document to reach consensus, but in the end, we rejected every proposal by the government.
Despite hours of negotiations, talks broke down as the government continues to progress their economic reforms through the Legislative Assembly, a clear sign that what workers want doesn't matter.
Our position is that the strike will continue. People must continue taking to the streets across the country. We can feel rejection to this economic reform growing.
The proposed economic reform is made up of 4 laws, one of which will replace sales tax with value-added tax or VAT.
This economic reform hurts the people. It's seriously hurting the prices of basic goods and medicine.
Workers continue to protest and raise awareness. So far, this is the longest strike in the country's recent history.
Politicians fail to understand that they represent the people. They do not serve the rich. They must listen to the majority, to the workers, and the vulnerable sectors of society.
Workers are demanding the economic reform be scrapped and replaced with a new one.
We will sit down and talk once the reform is scrapped. It makes no sense to move forward if they continue pushing this reform.
The government and unions want to resolve the situation, but until that happens, the strike will continue.
The IMF has approved a $290 million extended funds facility for Barbados. The 4-year arrangement will allow for an immediate payment of about $49 million. The rest of the funds will only be released after the successful completion of 7 semi-annual reviews. The new government inherited a debt of more than $7 billion. Meanwhile, St. Lucia aims to improve its health coverage with a World Bank loan. The bank has approved a $20 million credit from the International Development Association. The project seeks to ensure that people on the island are registered in the national health system. It also ensures that at least 60% of diabetic and hypertensive patients over 18 years old are treated according to national rules. The 2018 World Salsa Festival has ended in Cali, in the Cauca region of Colombia. Over 3,000 dancers participated in this event. This year's festival was marked by a high level of innovative dance styles. The international juries were impressed with how the dancers risked everything on stage and didn't hesitate to try new dance styles. Over 1,000 children also competed in this contest. We'll take one last short break, but stay with us. Welcome back. China has criticized the continued exercises of the United States Armed Forces in the South Asian Sea. According to Beijing, the measure goes against international agreements. The spokesman for the Ministry of Defense, Wu Qiang, described the entry of a U.S. missile destroyer into the waters of southern China as arbitrary. The Chinese official said the warship entered the waters of his country on Sunday despite not being authorized. He also said that for China, the measures represent a provocation by the Pentagon and they threaten peace and national sovereignty. To learn more about this, let's go to our correspondent in Beijing, Isaura Diaz.
Tensions between the United States and China are growing as the Chinese Navy encountered a warship in the southern Chinese Sea. Thanks to joint efforts, the situation has now been stabilized. The Chinese Navy identified a U.S. destroyer and asked it to leave. However, the United States is continuing with these provocative acts under the so-called Freedom of Maritime Operations. The Chinese ministry has urged the United States to reconsider its position. In the midst of the current trade war between the two powers, these actions are highly sensitive.
That was Isaura Diaz from China. Tunisian President Beji Caid Essebsi received Palestinian activist Ahed Tamimi at the presidential palace in Carthage. The teenager, a current icon of Palestinian resistance, attended the event. She was invited by the Tunisian president to commemorate the 33rd anniversary of the Israeli bombardment against the headquarters of the Palestine Liberation Organization, or PLO. The president gave Tamimi a gift for her bravery and expressed his commitment to maintain support in defense of the Palestinian people.
I hope that all of the Tunisian people are strong and that we are all one people. And in God's will, our deliverance is coming from Tunisia. We thank you for all of your support, your time with us. You are not only sympathizers, but also partners of our cause.
Members of parliament in Iraq have appointed Kurdish politician Barham Salem as the country's new president. Salem has appointed Adel Abdel Mahdi as his prime minister. The new president has made a call for unity and says that he is committed to Iraq's independence. Guinea is celebrating its 60th anniversary of independence. Thousands of people have gathered in the main stadium at capital Conakry to pay tribute to the martyrs that fought for independence. The place was decorated with flowers with the national colors and portraits of Pan-Africanism figures. Guinea was the first sub-Saharan country to obtain its independence from France. A wildlife conservation group says the African ivory trade to China is flourishing despite Beijing's ban. According to a report published by the wildlife charity Save the Elephants, the number of items seen for sale has grown by more than 60%. This despite the fact that China banned the sale of ivory from 2018. In Italy, controversy has spread after the arrest of a pro-refugee mayor. Domenico Lucano was arrested on charges of aiding illegal immigration. Hundreds of people have protested in Rome to support the mayor of the southern village of Riaci in Calabria. His supporters say the Italian government wants to target a champion for the integration of migrants. The cost of electricity in Spain continues to rise for the 6th consecutive month, to the highest in Spain's history. The measures have hit the most vulnerable households the hardest, and consumer associations are demanding that the government implement measures to curb speculation of the energy oligopoly. Energy poverty, which means lack of access to energy, exceeds 11%, with Andalusia as the most affected area. Thousands of families line up outside Endesa, the private electric company, to request aid and to denounce the rise in prices.
I have been gone for 4 months from my daughter's house because my wife is sick. And when I came back, I found a recipe for 77 euros from the bank. Nothing was working at home, not even the fridge.
This month, the electricity has gone up for the sixth time, being the highest in the history, an increase of 11.5 euros. It is a price spiral that many consumers cannot manage, and there are a lot of unpaid bills. Remember that the winter is approaching.
And with that, we come to the end of this news brief. But this and many other stories you can find on our website at telesurtv.net/English. Here you can find more information on Bolivia's President Evo Morales and his dispute with Chile, and many other stories. So go check it out. And you can also join us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.